This isn't something that we're in this, MPs didn't look at that and think that it was particularly dignified. Conservative MPs didn't think it was particularly dignified. They didn't think it was of the moment, and she suddenly found herself out on her ear.
Now, the Conservative leadership contest is reportedly in disarray after party executives failed to agree a timetable to replace Rishi Sunak. MPs and members of the party board met for about 5 hours yesterday to thrash out a deal, but were split on how fast to eliminate candidates and when a winner should be announced. Let's find out more with Times Radio's political commentator, Theo Usherwood. Morning, Theo.
Very good morning to you.
What seems to be the sticking point here?
The sticking point is whether to use the Conservative Party conference at the end of September, beginning of October, as in effect a beauty contest where the final two candidates could try and woo members to vote for them in this leadership contest, or whether it should actually be used as the final destination where the winner is announced. And they can't work out whether they need to go short and have that as the final staging post, the final point at which there might be a few questions and then the winner is announced with a big fanfare, or whether actually they need to have that much longer contest that could run into November, potentially December, to pick a winner.
And what would be the argument for going short and what would be the argument for going long?
Well, the argument for going short is that, and at the moment it's not looking like they're going to go that way, but the argument for going short is that at the moment Labour is owning the agenda. They're painting, and you can see this in everything that Keir Starmer and particularly Rachel Reeves does around the economy, but they're painting the tasks that they face in terms of turning the country around as being the result of 14 years of Tory failure. And the Conservative Party at the moment just isn't in the conversation. They're not landing any punches. They're not able to hold Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves to account because they don't have leadership. So if they go short, then they'll be able to try and at least combat or fight that narrative. The argument for going long is that the Conservative Party is facing an existential crisis. They need to pick the right leader to lead the party, and they need to take their time in doing it. And if they rush it, then there is a fear amongst MPs. They could pick the wrong candidate. There could be a split in the party. You could see individuals peel off potentially towards Nigel Farage and Reform, and that it would have a devastating impact on the Conservative Parliamentary Party.
So any news on when we're likely to find out what the party's decided?
They're two. We could find out quite quickly because, of course, we're coming up to the last day of term and next week, the week after, in Parliament, and they might decide that actually they need to set the timetable now. But it's likely that could actually drag on because no decision is going to be made in August because everybody's on holiday. That could drag on into September. They would then announce their timetable at the beginning of September. Once Parliament returns, they'd hold the short hustings, and I don't think there's necessarily a dispute over this. Where you see that, I say the short campaign, where the members go, you have 5 candidates, and we're looking at people like Kemi Badenoch, we're looking at Robert Jenrick, Tom Tugendhat, Victoria Atkins, James Cleverly. Those types, you start off with 5 or 6, and then, like a sort of X Factor contest, you whittle them down, and that will probably take place in. Looking like that seems to be a sort of a consensus around that taking place in September. The question is when the actual how long they go on the last part of the campaign, which is where the final two candidates have to win over the Conservative Party membership. And
there had been some speculation that you could have an interim leader for a period, someone like Ian Duncan Smith. Is that now off the table?
So yes, because I think from Rishi Sunak's point of view, he'd sort of agreed that he'd stand in and he'd be the party leader for whilst the new leader was picked, and he doesn't necessarily want to be party leader all the way up to leader of the opposition all the way up to November, December. Ian Duncan Smith appears to have ruled himself out of standing in as an interim. There was a lot of talk about him as the result came in from Chingford on election morning, because he'd won his seat and he'd be seen as a steady hand, a unifying individual who could tour the country, say sorry to the party membership and try and galvanise the party at a difficult time. But he seems to have ruled himself out from that, and there's no other obvious interim candidate. But having said that, does Rishi Sunak really want to be in his position as leader of the opposition, fighting Keir Starmer at PMQs come November, and actually does the party actually want to show that it's capable of moving on, finding a new leader, and holding Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves's feet to the fire?
And you mentioned some of the names who are likely to be in the frame, people like Tom Tugendhat and Suella Braverman, Kemi Badenoch, etc. As things stand, who is the frontrunner?
You've got to say Kemi Badenoch. I think from, there's a feeling that Suella Braverman was potentially her biggest, the biggest alternative for the right of the party, and she seems to have found herself isolated. Her main allies, people like John Hayes, have abandoned her. And I think the candidate on the right, it's going to be the main candidate on the right of the party at the moment. That's looking like Kemi Badenoch. You could potentially see Robert Jenrick, but he's seen as actually being quite soft and actually turning towards the right of the party, realising the direction of the party and the way it's going. But then you've got others on the left, the so-called wets within the Conservative Party, people like Tom Tugendhat. And it's likely that the final runoff will be somebody from the more centrist One Nation Conservative MP versus somebody from the right. And when you put that choice in front of the membership, which is of course very right wing, generally right wing, then you're likely that you end up with the candidate from the right of the party will win, and that's looking, at the moment at least, like it's going to be Kemi Badenoch.
And just finally, from your sense of things, Theo, is there anyone who's maybe a bit underpriced at the moment who you think is worthy of consideration but maybe isn't being talked about as much as they should be?
It was always surprising, I think, when Victoria Atkins, the former Health Secretary, suddenly came to the fore. I don't think there's going to be any big surprises. I think that the way the Conservative Party works, certainly in the House of Commons, is that it doesn't allow for that to happen very easily. You have to win over MPs. And if you're trying to win over MPs to get to the final two, then your name is going to be talked about. You're going to be known. You can't get through that first part of the process without having, at least behind the scenes, a profile that MPs can understand and that they can rally behind. So because of the structure of the leadership contest, you don't get somebody coming in very late as a dark horse candidate and suddenly seizing the initiative from the frontrunners. That's why at the moment there is a lot of work going on behind the scenes with the potential leadership candidates to build up their teams, to get the phone calls in, to get the messages in, to have those cups of tea and coffee and maybe something stronger to try and explain to their colleagues that they are the best candidate. All of that's going on, and whilst all of that is going on, we're going to know the names. We're going to know who the front runners are. It just doesn't allow for big surprises.
So even though it hasn't officially started, in effect, it's very much on.
Yeah, very much on. I mean, everybody's building their campaign teams. They know it's coming, but nobody wants to declare their hand whilst the process hasn't been set out, because that'd be seen as being premature. And you saw what happened to Suella Braverman when she made it very obvious that she was running and started making making some quite punchy speeches, to say the least, that actually people were like, hang on a moment, this isn't something we particularly like, and this isn't something that we're in this, MPs didn't look at that and think that it was particularly dignified. Conservative MPs didn't think it was particularly dignified. They didn't think it was of the moment, and she suddenly found herself out on her ear.
Theo, always appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Times Radio's political commentator, Theo Usherwood.